I'm going to start with, just some quick introductions. And we'll start maybe with, we have Craig here, we have Ashleigh next to him, we have Pete Mackinnon, Peter Stachowski, and Ishita. I hope I pronounced your name right.
Yeah, hold on a second.
And Craig's with HB. Ashleigh's with HB as well. Peter's with Tesora, Red Hat, IBM. Okay. So I'll start maybe with a question to Ashleigh and Ishita, because I've seen the presentation which you've done before about this, and you're probably the newest person on the Trove team at this point. What's it like to get started with Trove? Oh, I'll give you a microphone.
Yeah. Is this thing on? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I started working on Trove in January. It was a little bit disorienting at first because I hadn't done anything open source before, but once I found the IRC room and found out about the weekly Trove meeting, it really started to fall into place really quickly, and the community is really very helpful and very welcoming, and really willing to provide information, which has helped me get on board relatively quickly.
I recently started with IBM. It's barely been a month, I think, and I started working on Trove. I think the hardest part for me was just getting familiar with everything that's already exists in Trove and just understanding the code base, but the community is really helpful. It's easy to reach out on IRC. I bought the book, and that really helped me get started, do the setup, and just understand how a user would use Trove and understand both the front-end and back-end views of Trove.
So I have two follow-ups to that. So I think you guys can hear me, right? I'll shout a little louder otherwise. Both of you mentioned IRC, hashtag OpenStack Trove, for those of you who are not familiar with that. Anything to do with Trove is on that IRC channel, and the book, of course, which you mentioned. Thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Maybe Pete, things which introduce yourself, things which you worked on in this release, in the Liberty cycle, maybe the previous release, and what you find interesting and challenging about Trove.
Okay, one of the things that Tesora and myself in particular have worked on in this last release cycle is increasing some of the breadth of coverage of the different data store. MySQL obviously has a lot of implementations. There's a lot of capabilities that have been done there. Some of the other data stores have been a little lagging, and one of the focus of Tesora, and as I said myself, in this cycle has been improving that. So I was working on the Redis, part of the Redis implementation, specifically the replication aspect. We had previously implemented replication for MySQL, so we've got two different forms of that in previous releases of Trove. And now we've also got it for Redis, and other members of our team have worked on other ones. We also have clustering now for Redis, and also I believe MongoDB. So yeah, some of the interesting things working on the Trove project is that you as a developer and as somebody who has worked with databases extensively, even after all this time, you still get to work with different things, right? Like almost, it's a rare developer that's basically said, yeah, I've developed on 15 different databases or data stores as we call them. So there's almost always something new to learn. And although data stores have a lot of stuff in common, each one also does things a little bit differently. And just because you know how to tune MySQL very, very well, that may not, the same things may not transfer exactly to another data store like Redis, which is typically an in-memory key pair type data store. So it gives you the chance to, to cross-pollinate your expertise, as it were, and to work with some of these things that you find interesting.
Pete?
Oh, okay, there we go. So I also, kind of like Ashleigh, I started working with Trove in January of this year, and of course Red Hat has a OpenStack distribution, both a commercial one and a community one. And the thing I approached first as an outsider was, as a developer, how do I test this thing? How do I engage this thing? So it turned out that there's two aspects to Trove from a developer and test sort of point of view. One is the core Trove code base, and then there's an ancillary project called Trove Integration, which also has the name of RedStack. And as I got going, I realized that the support for distributions, various Linux distributions, and the packages that are provided by those distributions didn't necessarily fit into both Trove and Trove integration. So basically I set about working with the community, and I'll echo the sentiment. It's fantastic community. Everybody's very helpful, from just asking a random question on